we're going to do is we're going to do a poem. Now, this poem is a difficult poem, I think. It's called Because I Could Not Stop for Death. That's kind of a depressing title, I think, too, but that's okay. This poem is written on the 11th and 12th grade reading level and the comprehension level, but I know that you can handle this. This is going to be on ReadWorks, and you're going to answer the questions. Here's my second surprise for you. The second surprise is, during this video, I'm going to tell you all of the answers. And there are actually like 8 questions on ReadWorks, but you don't have to do 8 questions. You have to do the 7 multiple choice questions. If I give you the answers to them, those are the questions to do. You don't have to do any more. Anyone not watching this video will complete all of the questions, and I'll grade them. Okay, let's get started. First thing, goodbye. Because I could not stop for death. What I'm going to do first is read the whole poem to you, and you'll see it's a little confusing. Oh, come on. Well, here we go. Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. You can tell this poem was written a long time ago because of the way she's dressed in old-timey, old-fashioned clothes. She was writing this poem in the 1800s. I'm going to run through these. This is what I will come back and explain to you. But right now, here is the poem itself. Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. We passed the school where children played, their lessons scarcely done. We passed the fields of gazing grains, we passed the setting sun. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice but a mound. Since then, 'tis centuries, but each feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. Now, as I said, that seems, when you read it just like that, it seems very difficult. But now we're going to go through it bit by bit. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. First thing I would like you to recognize is death a person? No. It may be caricatured by a person sometimes, but death is not a person. However, the poet has made him a person. Therefore, this is an example of personification. The poet turned death into a person. He kindly stopped for me. The carriage, here's how they used to travel in those days, a carriage with horses. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. In the carriage sitting down is the poet, death, and immortality. Immortality means living forever. We slowly drove, he knew no haste. Haste is he wasn't in a hurry. And the poet, I had put away my labor, my work, and my leisure, my fun things that I do. I was just sitting there doing nothing for his civility. Civility is another word for politeness. In other words, the poet was being polite by not working or not doing something enjoyable like reading because she was with company. You don't think of death like that, I don't think. Now, here's the carriage. The carriage is traveling. We passed the school where children played, their lessons scarcely done. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun. Notice how the sun is going down, but the carriage is going up into the sky. We passed before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice but a mound. Notice, this is a small building, but it's not really a house. As you can see, it's kind of built into the ground, and this is where they put dead bodies. Now, the person whose family this belongs to must have some money, because other people were just buried in graves in the ground. But here, when the person died, they were put into a coffin, and then the coffins were put into this little house where all the family will be laid to rest. So this is kind of a house where dead bodies are. But they passed that, and they continued up into the sky. Since then, 'tis centuries, hundreds of years have passed, but each feels shorter than the day I first thought that the horses' heads were headed toward eternity. In other words, the poet is still alive in eternity, maybe in that golden city in heaven or whatever. So it's talking about a sad subject, which is death. However, the person doesn't have a bad attitude about it. Now, here come the questions. Pay attention for the answers. Number 1, this is easy. Who kindly stopped, line 2, for the speaker of the poem? I hope you already know the answer to this, but we'll go back. Look what line says. Line 1 says, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. Who stopped? Death. Now, number 2. How has the poet constructed each stanza of the poem? A stanza is talking about all of the lines that make like a little paragraph. How are these organized? Are they the first and third lines of each stanza rhyme? That's easy to check. Here's the first line. It ends with death. Now, if it rhymes, this word is going to have the same ending as death. Ourselves, death, ourselves. They don't rhyme. Haste, to, they don't rhyme. So letter A is not correct. In each stanza, all 4 lines have the same number of beats. Okay, if I had my camera on, I could show you what we're talking about. They're talking about the same number of syllables. Ooh, I could do this. Because I could not stop for death. How many parts is that? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, does this have the same number of syllables as this one? He kindly stopped for me. This one had 8. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, nope. Number 2 can't be correct either. This one's easy to check as well. Each stanza begins with the word we and ends with a common noun. Does each stanza begin with we? No. We, no. So that answer is not correct either. Each stanza is constructed as a single sentence. All 4 lines equals 1 sentence. Let's see. Because I could not stop for death, comma, he kindly stopped for me, semicolon. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. There's the period. Yes, this is 1 long sentence. So that is the answer. And each stanza is constructed as a single sentence. Question number 3, death is polite. Do you remember the word that I told you has the meaning of polite? Is it in the 3rd stanza, 5th, 4th, or 2nd? We're looking for politeness. Remember this word? Civility? That's the word that means polite. And which stanza is it? 1, 2. So we're looking 3, 5th, 4th, 2nd. There's your answer. Question number 4. The speaker of the poem is someone who has died. How can the speaker's tone best be described? The tone is, how does the speaker feel, or how does the poet feel? Angry and bitter because they're dying? Did you see any angry words there? No. Energetic and curious. Curious means wanting to know what's going to happen next. Is there that anxiety? No. Frantic and frightened. Now you would think when death is coming to someone that they would be extremely scared and terrified, but we don't have any words that say that. Calm and measured. A measured is like peaceful, taking everything in stride. That would have to be the answer. The speaker was not scared at all, but just went along with death. And how about number 5? What is the main theme of this poem? What is it talking about? What's it trying to say? While immortality may seem like a great gift, it is actually a heavy burden. Living forever seems like a gift, but really it is something terrible. We have no evidence. We have no evidence for that answer. Death is something to be feared and avoided at all costs. Number 1, you can't avoid death. When death comes to you, you're dead. The second one, it should be feared. Some people do fear it, but in this poem, no, it doesn't say anything about that. It is often difficult and painful for someone who has lived a long life to accept death. Well, first of all, we don't know how long this poet has lived because there is no evidence. And she just got into the carriage, so she accepted death. Death may signify the end of life, but it is also linked to immortality. Immortality is in this poem, and we know that death is the end of life, but the poet is saying that there is eternity. There is life after death. There is an eternity. So that is the answer. Number 6. Why might the poet have personified death in this poem? Why did the poet make death seem like a person? To compare obedient horses with a person who has died? Really? It doesn't say anything like that. To emphasize the similarity between the idea of immortality and eternity. Both of these words may be in the poem, but they don't put them together to compare them. So that's not the answer. To argue that life after death does not exist. That does not go with our poem because it talks about going up into the sky into eternity. That's not the answer. And again, why did it make death seem like a person? To make death seem like a human being instead of an event. That's the best answer. Number 7, read these lines from the poem. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We drove slowly, he knew no haste. Whom does the word we in line 5 refer to? Here's line 5. We. Who are they talking about? We go up here and it's ourselves. Who are ourselves? We know it's death and the poet and immortality. So that is going to be the answer. Not just the speaker, death, and immortality. Yes, that's the best answer. Now you see, there are only 7 questions and you already know the answer. Good work for listening to the video. Go ahead and sign on to ReadWorks. Find the poem that is an assignment, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, and answer those multiple choice questions. Awesome. See you later.